Good morning. Well, evening, because in this video, the sun is about ready to go down. And about an hour previously, before this, I was fitting my radiator, trying to get my cooling fan to fit. But on these LS's, they got this pressed fit water pump pulley that sticks out like, I don't know, like an inch and 3/16 or inch and a quarter. I don't know. I didn't measure it. And if they would have went to a bolt-on system, that snout definitely wouldn't have been there. But yeah, I could have spent some more money and got an LS3 water pump that's shorter and got new auxiliary brackets for my alternator and all that stuff. But I'm doing this job one piece at a time, just as it goes, as I'm able to save up the money and buy parts. And that would take a lot of money from other parts that I wanted to do on this project. So I decided to not do it and just make it work. And I didn't have a radiator when I started this project, and I didn't have dimensions, and I didn't have a fan, I didn't have fan dimensions. I just started going and got the motor in. I'm like, oh heck, it looks good right there. So I went and tacked it in place, and that was that. Well, like a couple months later, when I saved up some money for some other parts, and I decided to get this radiator put in. I got it so the radiator would go in. I was thinking, heck, I might be golden if I can find a low profile enough fan. But unfortunately, I couldn't find a fan with enough CFMs that was low profile enough to cool this engine off and fit in the spot that I needed to go in. So unfortunately, I had to make some changes, and it's going to be all right in the end. It's going to be worth it. So here I am, lifting up the motor, getting it all tied up, making sure body's all square, and I just start hacking. Luckily the engine was tacked in because I didn't go solid yet. So I had to cut about 3 tacks on each side of the engine, pick it up with a cherry picker, and slide it back. I was hoping to get at least an inch of clearance and still have some firewall clearance, which I was only able to get about 7/8 of an inch. So most of my goal is met, and I still have plenty of firewall clearance. Not like plenty, not like a ton, but it's tight, but it's gonna work. And I didn't have to cut the trans tunnel, I didn't have to cut the firewall, I didn't have to cut any of that. All I had to do was just trim the motor mounts away from the frame that luckily was just tacked, and slide it back. And this is why you tack it, because you get in situations like this, and it's better than cutting out a big long weld that you're gonna be cutting for quite some time and cleaning it back up to make it look so it's acceptable again. Where luckily I just literally just a couple minutes on each side. Honestly, the hardest part was, once it was out, was getting it relined back up. Like, the cutting wasn't that bad, and making sure I had enough clearance that when the motor was going to rock and running and the bushings were going to flex, that it wasn't going to hit anything, because that is not what I want to do. I want to be done with this thing. I'm not dreading building it. I'm actually having a lot of fun, but I do want to enjoy it when it's done. So, and I understand that if I do it right now, I'm going to enjoy it a heck of a lot more than being broke down on a trail somewhere, because that's never fun. I've been that guy with my last Toyota. My last Toyota worked great, but it also was scabbed together and just held together with baling wire and duct tape, kind of, in a sense, because it was thrown together scabby, didn't have time to do anything, didn't have any money. I built this when I was in my late teens and early 20s, my old one, and I learned a lot from my mistakes. And by the time I had a truck, and part of the reason I got rid of it and parted it out was it was so overwhelming, just all the loose ends I had to tie back together, because I just scabbed and scabbed and scabbed. And really, that was pretty much why I got rid of it, because I was like, I might as well do a do-over. Like, I got a rock crawler, but it's a death trap, and it needs a lot of work, and I just needed a do-over. And once I got rid of it, I don't know, stayed away from it for a little bit. But I've had other projects come up and I didn't stick with it because I got overwhelmed. You know, I'm a guy who sees like big picture. I'm always seeing the big picture and stuff. And when you're doing a project like this, you got to get tunnel vision on one thing at a time, or else you get overwhelmed. And I told myself that I'm going to try and do something every day on this truck, even if it's something little, like putting a couple zip ties on here, or just cleaning some stuff out of it. You know, just looking at it at least going down there, checking on it and seeing what everything's going on. And honestly, one step at a time, that's the way to do it. Tomorrow's a new day and you can tackle another piece of your project without getting overwhelmed. And I think that's very, very important to do, because if not, you get overwhelmed and you say screw it, and you give up, and then you don't do it, and then you get mad because you don't ever do anything later, because, well, you keep giving up on what you're doing, so you're not doing nothing. And that's that. Well, got the motor moved back. 7/8 of an inch is all I could get, but it helped out a ton. Header clearance, way better. Wasn't bad when I first put the headers on, but then I moved the steering box and it made it right in the way, and it was actually rubbing on the header, the steering shaft was. So moving the motor back, straight back on the same plane, same everything, actually made about 3/4 of an inch more space between the header and the steering rod. Plus, I get 7/8 more of an inch more water pump to electric radiator fan for cooling, because just wasn't going to happen without it. So miscalculation or just flying by the seat of my pants. That's what I had to do to make it work, and that's what we're doing, making it work. So, well, it's late and I'm getting out of here. See ya. Good morning. It's a new day. Moved the motor back last night, trying to get the radiator in, but it still doesn't fit. Not quite enough clearance. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to trim the extra on this pulley. Give me almost 1/4 inch right there. And then where my radiator mounts down here, I'm going to move the studs on the radiator about 1 inch forward to hopefully give me enough room for my fan and the water pump clearance, because right now it's just not going to work, and well, it's got to work. So here we are, and that's what we're doing right now. Well, that was slick. Got the mount pulled off. I'm gonna move these studs 1 inch off the center line towards the front. Well, towards the rear technically, because that's gonna space the radiator 1 inch away on the truck. So I think we'll be good after that, but we'll give it a shot and see what happens. here. Let me set you guys up. See how this works. Hopefully it works. Actually works. Not kind of works. Maybe it'll work out the first time. Well, this is like the 6th time, 7th time, but we'll see. Once everything's bolted up tight, I think we'll have about, well, with my bushings, should be sitting about right there for clearance. It's pretty close. Maybe polish that off a little more on that water pump snout, but I think that's the best I can do without cutting the whole firewall out and moving the motor back even more. So I think that's gonna have to be, and you're gonna have to build a decent good sized bumper to keep the radiator safe. But it's going, and that is that.